You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of humor-breaking, motivation-loving, empowering life hacks and tips for all of the medically adultish people in your life. I'm Dominique Vale, founder of InvisiYouth Charity and your host for InvisiYouth Chat Sessions. And today is a special day because it is Season 7's premiere, everybody, and it is our 101st episode. We've hit triple digits. You can tell if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, hop over on our YouTube. You'll get to see. We might have decked out our little studio room and have some balloons and some glam around us to celebrate our 101st episode. So I just want to take a quick moment at the top to thank all of you, our InvisiYouth Galaxy community, all of our podcast listeners and viewers for supporting, listening, and watching this little podcast show of ours. We've gotten our InvisiYouth Chat Session podcast to be downloaded in dozens of countries, thousands of views and downloads, and it is our first digital resource that we ever made, which became the catalyst of all of our new digital monthly resources that we have as a package every month now. So we want to thank you, and we are so grateful to you that we're able to be here in Season 7 and have 101 episodes. And there's no better person that I want to celebrate our Season 7 premiere with than our special guest for today. We have Adaptive CrossFit athlete and mentality coach Amy Bream with us. Born with PFFD, which is proximal focal femoral deficiency and missing a majority of her right leg, Amy has grown up thriving to challenge herself and find goals. After moving to Nashville in 2014 to pursue a music career, Amy then went to a kickboxing class and was introduced to the world of fitness, personal training, and CrossFit. After beginning to compete professionally in 2021, Amy has thrived in the CrossFit world, even ranking third worldwide in women's lower extremity in the 2023 CrossFit Games. And now Amy has taken her expertise and experience into personal coaching in her amputee fitness program, group fitness programs, and accountability coaching. Amy is a real fun, thriving, and passionate example of what makes CrossFit and adaptive CrossFit so fascinating and fun. And we're going to learn so much about her and the fitness world today. So Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It is so exciting. And like I said, we're going to have so much fun getting to chat with you, learn some life stories later on in the show, and get some fitness tips and confidence boosting for all of you. So make sure you stay tuned to that last segment. And as always, before we go into the show, we hope you guys click that subscribe button while you're listening or watching. You have about another 55 minutes to do so. So make sure you click that button, and I will remind you at the end if you haven't. Don't worry. And now we're going to go into our very first segment, 5-second challenge.
5-second challenge. 5-second challenge.
5-second challenge. We're going to have fun where I get to list off a random question in 5 seconds and let Amy give me a rapid answer. So, Amy, are you ready to answer some rapid questions?
I'm a talker, but I'm going to, I got this. I'm ready.
Good. I love it. What would be the last time you gave yourself some good self-care?
I love getting a good coffee, and holiday drinks are out now. And so I definitely got a chocolate mocha for myself the other day.
Ooh, I love it. I love a good holiday drink too. Don't tell me that. What was a trendy workout class that you see on Instagram, or a trend that you're like, oh, I would give that a try?
There's those Pilates like gyms that are coming out with like the machines, the rocking machines. And I hear that they're really difficult, a lot of stability. And so I'd be interested to take that to see how I could hold up in them.
Oh, no, that's cool. Anytime I see those equipment pieces, I'm like, oh, those look interesting.
I know.
I agree. What was your best career moment to date so far?
Best career moment, I would say, honestly, the 2021 CrossFit Games. I had a video from that go viral, and it really launched the career that I'm able to do now. And I'm very grateful for it. Wasn't anticipating it.
Oh, so. I love that. We love a good viral moment when it goes for the better. I love that.
Yeah, it's definitely the most pivotal, I would say, to me going here. So, yeah.
I love that. When was the last time you laughed so hard you cried?
I had a very large bug get stuck in my house and I had to kill it. And I started screaming really hard and my friend was here and I was so over the top and ridiculous. We laughed till we cried.
I love that.
I'm not a bug.
That would be me. It would be a whole Broadway show if I had to do it.
Was. It definitely was.
I love that. What would be, if you most likely were going to be found in a second location for a home, if you could put a second home anywhere, you would be like, oh, Amy's putting it here.
Somewhere on the beach. I mean, practically, if my family listens to this, definitely Pennsylvania where they are. But, on the off chance that they don't listen, you could find me on the beach that's somewhat close to mountains. So probably North Carolina for me.
Oh, nice. I like that. What is your favorite age that you've hit so far?
Honestly, I'm loving in my 30s. I know that's kind of cliche to say, but yeah, I'm 32. I'm loving that.
I agree. I like it as well. So I agree with that. If you found yourself singing a song in the car or the shower, what's a song that's like your go-to that you kind of will always pick up on?
So Danielle Bradbury, she's not like the most popular artist in the world, but I love her album. Have we met yet? We haven't met yet, something like that. But she's got some real great songs to just sing at the top of your lungs. So there's a song called Worth It. And I love to sing that with the windows down in my car.
I love that. If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, what would you pick?
Tacos.
See, and there's variety there. So you
yes, like there's Tex-Mex. Yeah, you can mix it up. You can throw some audibles in there.
I like that. If you had to do a totally different career than the one that you're in, what would it be?
Probably music. That's what I studied in school. And so I would probably go back to something like that.
I like that. And then if you had a party game or board game that you think, if this was at a party, I'm going to win 100% every time.
The office trivia game. Oh. Anything with office trivia, I'm going to do pretty well at. That's my favorite show.
Oh, I love that. My sister would be the French trivia. It's frightening. She'd be like, that's season blah, 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 episode blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa.
Next level.
I'm just like, I can't. I have mad respect for that. Oh my God. And then when was the last time you gave good advice?
Well, good advice, I'd like to think, just give on the regular. Well, ironically, actually, yesterday I was at a women's luncheon for women in business. It was called Heels and Handshakes here in Nashville. And I was on a panel. So specifically, we were there to give advice for women in business. So I would say yesterday for me.
You're like, I hope one of them worked.
Yeah, I was like, I hope I said something that was helpful for someone there.
I love that. That's a good answer. I like that a lot. And you're out of rapid fire. I'm out of rapid fire questions for you. You've made it.
That was a little nerve wracking. I was like, make it short, Amy. Just say it.
I love that. And before we go into our next segment, something else that is short and sweet that I love is our InvisiYouth charity shop. It is where we sell our Subtle Activist color block bracelets. You'll see them on display behind me and on my wrist as I'm wearing them. They are made by our volunteers with chronic illness and disability, exclusive on our Etsy page, and they are $4 with zero global shipping costs as well. And so you get to basically get a bracelet and make a donation at the same time. So it's a win-win. And it's our adjustable bracelets that are very color neutral and chic. And we call them our Subtle Activist color block bracelets because we love subtle activism at InvisiYouth. That is our style of activism, where we basically say it's like that Starbucks cup left in the Game of Thrones scene. We like some curiosity to be sparked when we're doing our activism to get conversations going, and you can raise some awareness for those young adults in the chronic illness and disability space. So if you or someone you care about might want a bracelet and also know you're giving back to charity, you can go on our Etsy page and buy one of our Subtle Activist color block bracelets. The link is on the screen as well as in the description and show notes. So make sure you give that a look and check that out. We might be adding something else to our Etsy store later in the year. So stay tuned for that. Wink to that one. And we're going to go to our next segment, Medical Pop Headlines.
Medical Pop Headlines. Medical Pop Headlines.
medical pop headlines, we're doing a new spin on an original segment from InvisiYouth Chat Sessions where we're going to be chatting about one of the things in our special guest Amy's life that has brought her to the headlines, and that is her skill and love of CrossFit and adaptive CrossFit. So we want to get all the details behind the CrossFit world and how it connects so much to Amy. So I know the one thing is how we mentioned even in your bio that CrossFit kind of fell into the path of your life in more of like a serendipitous way. So for you, what was it about CrossFit versus other types of fitness that kind of drew you in the most and was the most unique to you?
Yeah, well, people assume that I've been in the gym for a really long time. Now it's coming on almost 10 years, but I didn't really work out publicly before that. So when I was that person that was always going into the gym and trying to like enjoy it, but it was a necessary evil for me. So my first love in the gym was boxing. And then when I came to CrossFit, like what made me really love boxing and stay with that first was I loved learning. And I'm not like, of course, you can always get better at learning. But what really drew me to CrossFit when I started was the point of CrossFit is to take lots of different forms of functional fitness and combine them. So it's literally kind of impossible to get tired of something because there's always a new skill to learn. There's always a different mode of the skill to learn because you're literally, like the name suggests, you're crossing different forms of fitness into one in different like modalities. And so I just, when I changed the focus in the gym to how am I learning rather than what my body looks like or, anything like that. For me personally, that keeps me more motivated. So I've never reached a point in CrossFit where I'm like, oh, I'm bored. Like there's nothing else to learn. There's just always something to get better at.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it does. Like you said, it does seem like there's always, even if you're watching it, everyone's doing, so even if they're doing the same thing, everybody kind of does it differently. So there is that like uniqueness to it for every person as well, which I think is really unique. And even kind of off of that too, do you feel because of there being CrossFit, like an adaptive CrossFit on your end as well, do you wish there was something that you thought that the wider public could understand about adaptive CrossFit better and even like within the community of CrossFit mutually knowing CrossFit and adaptive CrossFit that you wish people in this actual space could kind of learn from one another on?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm always advocating for, and I push a lot on my own page, is for people to understand the why and the education behind it. So I think it can be a stigma that adaptive CrossFit means you're less of an athlete or less serious, or, maybe not everyone holds that thought, but it's one that I found where they assume adaptive less of an athlete. And the point of adaptive CrossFit is not to do less than, what the other divisions are doing. It's just learning how to adapt movements in the way that your body was meant to move. And so I find that really interesting. And like, I'm always pushing to become better. And, that takes time and experience. It's not like I expect to immediately be elite at everything or, even close to that. But a lot of adapting is just that. It's just adapting. You're figuring out how your body can move. And I personally find that really interesting. I wish that people who aren't in the adaptive CrossFit space, when they're watching it, it's easy to have the simple, shallow, like, oh, that's really hard to do. But it's one thing to say that. It's one thing to try a movement and to actually feel just how difficult it is. So one thing that I always love is, is there a way that we can tangibly bring this to people so they understand just how incredible it is what these athletes are doing? Well beyond myself. There's many people that I'm like so impressed by in this space. So yeah, it's just a different way of doing the same kind of movements. So.
Yeah, no, I love how you said that too. It's just people understanding that it's the same difficulty. It just looks different. And that people always, because they're similar to like the Olympics, Paralympics, people want to separate them in terms of even skill level. But there's just so many other things, like you said, that has to be taken into consideration when it's an adaptive sport that make it, to me, even like the difficulty level becomes even more, because how in tune you as an athlete would have to be with your body is so much more than someone else, because you have to really know how it moves and where you're compensating on different sides to make it equal and everything. So like you said, bringing that to a public setting, even for those in the chronic illness space that are like, I don't even know, could I even do any of this? Because it looks so extreme to them that they're like, where do I even start in with it? That I think, like you said, just seeing how that really, like you said, you're making it accessible, bringing it to a social media platform so people can see that, I think is really unique for people even in the illness and disability space that find it curious and they're like, oh, but I don't really know where I would fit into all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And even I wanted to ask too on a little tangent of it. I was curious when you had mentioned your initial background was in music and then you transitioned into working in fitness and with CrossFit. So for you, do you feel like there's anywhere that those two interests kind of intersect still for you, or maybe your music background and training kind of helps you in a different way with how you approach your CrossFit training?
Oh, there's so many similarities. It's funny because I think it's such a stigma that athletes and musicians are polar opposites, but the theory of what they do is incredibly similar. So when I started CrossFit, I think it was much easier for me to have the discipline to do what I needed to do to get better because, people, it's like anything. When you're just learning something, you don't know how much there is to learn. Because if you did know, you'd probably be so overwhelmed that you wouldn't really get too much into it. But, you watch a musician and, if they're a professional musician, of course, it's beautiful music, but you don't know just how intricate everything is and how many hours of practice went to really boring things to make that happen. And so when I went, to CrossFit and in the gym, even before CrossFit too, when you're getting better at something in the gym, you have to do very tedious things. You have to warm up, you have to do drills, you do the same movements. Like you're not having these, like stereotypical TikTok, like let's do these insane movements all the time. No, you're doing the same things over and over again and building that mind body repetition. And thankfully I was already used to that because I had spent my college years spending hours in the practice room alone in like a 3x5 room, just practicing scales. And so I was like, this makes sense. And also specifically, of course, not everyone in fitness wants to compete, but if you do want to do that, learning how to calm down your nerves and use adrenaline for your good rather than allow it to shut you down definitely helped me. For me, I had never done a competition before the CrossFit Games, like with something with my body working out, but I knew what it felt like to feel incredible nerves, like you're about to pass out and be like, how do I get my fingers and my notes and my voice to do what I want it to do? And so that definitely translated into handling adrenaline well in fitness. So
yeah, I love how you said that too, because I always would imagine that probably like on your end, like getting into a better headspace, you'll always hear athletes talk about, oh, my playlist is so important and it's so important. But I feel like on your end, it probably would be even more so because you have such a connection to music that it would filter into how you would, what you would want to listen to for certain things would definitely have a even bigger impact because you know how certain music makes you feel and what they were doing creating that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
no, I love that. Yeah, I was curious about, because like you said, the connection between the arts and like a physical sport people don't make, and I love that on your end it did seem so like intertwined with what you're doing, which I was really curious about. And even on your end, kind of ending the segment, I know there's such a, like I said, there's such an intensity that kind of comes around when people think of CrossFit because they only think of it at the level they're watching it on television and not how they're just getting into it on a general kind of fitness realm. So for you, what, as an athlete getting into CrossFit, especially in the adaptive CrossFit lane, what was it for you that when you were getting into it in the early stages that really you felt comfortable being involved in it and also then wanting to continue getting better and better and then making it a profession?
Yeah, for me, I'm naturally a competitive person, but I had never competed before. So I think the thought of that, if I had known everything involved from the get-go, I would have been very nervous. It was a step by step. And now I love competing, but it's because I took like one step at a time kind of situation. And my track was a little bit faster than I was not thrown in because I signed up for the competition, but I started competing a little sooner than most people do when they start CrossFit. But I would say, like, again, I just fell in love with the sport and the skill behind it and also the thought process, because it's very easy, especially when you're out of the CrossFit space, but also fitness in general, to look at someone and be like, oh, what a meathead like thing. Like and there's this stigma sometimes that you assume fitness equals lack of intelligence. And that's very much not the case. And for CrossFit, I loved when I started watching like people compete at an elite level. I watched people on a competition floor do something that made no sense to me because they didn't look like they were sprinting. They were very calm, collected, and almost seemed like they were moving too slow. Yeah. And it turned out that they would win the competition because they were so in tune with what their body could do and when, that they didn't let themselves like go to muscle fatigue. And it was just, there's so much mind like strategy that people don't realize in the sport, that you have to be incredibly aware of what your body is capable of in the moment and when you can push and when you need to pull back. I just found that fascinating. I was like, man, this is like way beyond just like grunting out a workout. This is like thinking through and learning how to keep your mind calm in a very stressful environment, which goes well beyond working out. Like the things that I've learned in competing in CrossFit have helped me so much as an entrepreneur. So I just, that drew me just to kind of keep wanting to go and see just how far I could go capacity wise.
Yeah. And I love how you said that too, that it was you actually like taking those steps where people will get in, especially in the chronic illness or disability space, other people will make you then sometimes question your own capability and what you know you're capable of, because they're just unfamiliar with the process of what it could be like. And so you then become extra intimidated to potentially try something. So I love how you said for you it was this, your curiosity was piqued, but then also this like slow progression of like a little step here or there, and then you were just becoming more and more comfortable with it. And then that kind of really snowballed into what it became for you. But I think for a lot of people that kind of would be a nice way of kind of trying to get into something too, is just move past when someone else or other people or even yourself might question that capability and be like, well, I can maybe this part of it I can try. I know that I would be good in, and then kind of see where else you can take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. That was such a good way to end that segment. And we're ending the first half of the episode, guys. I can't even believe we're already halfway through. And don't worry, we're about to get to everyone's favorite segment soon. So that one time is coming up. But before we get to it, I'd just like to thank all of you guys for watching or listening to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions. As I mentioned at the top of the show, it is one of our 6 digital resources we provide monthly for free for all of the teens and young adults with chronic illness and disability around the world that come to InvisiYouth for our life improving and personal growth resources. We're all about filling that non-medical aspect of life with a chronic illness or disability with some personal development, so you have the tools tangibly to you to improve the different parts of your life that you can then find that success and joy and adapt to thrive. So we always put our donate link on the screen. It always helps us because 100% of every donation goes directly towards funding each of our resources and programs so they can remain free, and we can get to milestones like this with 101 episodes and be able to provide these all year long. So if you're able to donate, that's amazing, and we thoroughly appreciate it. And if you would be able to pay it forward and share it to others that you know and see if they could donate as well, it definitely helps our nonprofit. So we thoroughly appreciate that. And now we're going to go into everyone's favorite segment. It is So That One Time.
So that one time.
So that one time, you guys know, it hasn't changed in all 7 seasons. We let me take a break. I can have a nice drink of my coffee and let our guests tell us a story. So, Amy, the mic is yours.
So one of the most pivotal, a lot of people like look at my story and I'm very different than I was even 10 years ago. And so they kind of see that big picture and they're like, what was it that made you want to actually start making this change? And I always tell people it's a progression. It was a step by step. But one of the first pivotal moments for me happened when I was a sophomore year in college, and I went to the beach with my family, and I was with my brother-in-law, and he was with my family, I should say, and he's military background. He's a very straightforward person, and we stopped outside of a shop, and kind of without beating around the bush, he just asked me a very direct question, and he said, Amy, you don't have confidence. Like, that wasn't really the question, and he was like, why is that? Like, you look at the ground when you walk, you don't look boys in the eye, like you cover your leg and your prosthesis most of the time. What's with this? And people weren't usually quite that direct with me when it came to my legs. So I was a little like taken aback for a moment, but I came back with, the typical like, oh, like men aren't interested in a girl with one leg, and all these kind of self-pity reasons that I came back with. And he didn't back down, and he came back and pushed a little harder. And he's like, no, actually, that's not true. He's like, if he literally looked at me and he said, if men are being weird around your leg, it's because you're being weird. He was like, people respond to the energy that you give. And so if you're waiting to be confident by waiting for other people's reactions, it will never come, because it starts with you first. And then people will react to what you give them. And of course, part of me was upset to hear that in the moment, because he was basically saying it was my fault. But at the same time, there was this curious point, part of me that was thinking, well, if it's my fault, can I change it? And it was the first moment that I had the thought, do I actually like have the power to change this narrative that I've created around my leg? And, step by step, nothing changed overnight, but it was this really empowering moment that I will never forget, that just thought, maybe I can actually do something and do other things than what I think that I'm capable of. And so we created a little game, because I always think like those moments are cool, but you have to have some kind of action. So he told me that I was on a confidence scale of 1 to 10. I was at like a 3. So he started giving me like little tasks to do that were very simple. They were like, ask a boy to coffee, or put a skirt on and go in public. And, they were, now looking back, I'm like, oh, like that's nothing. But to me, they felt like mountains at the time.
Yeah.
But it was also the first step that I took. It took me lots of time. Like, it, again, didn't happen overnight, but it was the first step of me practicing action after like having a moment. And eventually, of course, I moved to Nashville. I graduated, and I started creating those tasks for myself. And I look back at that moment, I'm like, I think that was really the first moment that laid the foundation for this like kind of new lifestyle mindset that I went into, as an adult. So
I love that. That's like you said, I like that it was, like you said, slightly like in a weird way, you do accountability coaching now, and in an odd full circle, your brother-in-law was somewhat of doing that for you back then as well. Maybe like you said, more in a blunt way, but nonetheless, I love that. I love that. A shout out to your brother-in-law, for you're like, love that. But yeah, no, I think that's, like you said, really sweet. And also, like you said, that it took time, because people would hear like, oh, you did those like little confidence boosting tasks, but it wasn't like right when he gave you one, you did it like 2 days later. It was like knowing that those things, you can set goals for yourself that are small or big, and like work towards getting comfortable to then go and do it. I feel like people, like you said, that'll be great of people knowing that progression over time, like you said, looking back on it 10 years later, being like, oh, wow, that actually was really impactful. And look how far in 10 years I came, where probably back then you were like, this is taking so long. I don't feel any different back then. But then looking at it now, it really did set a good groundwork for you with that time behind you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I'm gonna ask my brother-in-law what are we doing? Ask him that.
Put some pressure on him.
Yeah, I'll be like, what's my confidence number? He'll be like, what am I doing? He'll look at my sister and be like, what do I do?
Yeah, what should I say?
My sister would give me an honest one first, and then he'd be like, I'll back her. I concur. For sure. Yeah, I love that. We're gonna go into our final segment with Amy. What's in your toolkit?
What's in your toolkit? What's in your toolkit?
What's in your toolkit is, we love a good tip sheet and good tips of life, you know that. So we love to make things more adaptive, more accessible, and get some life advice. And so we want to get some tips and life hacks to make it all the more confident building for you going into the fitness world, especially those in the chronic illness and disability space. So we had to make a segment for Amy and get to talk to her about advice, tips, and ideas from her toolkit that you guys can have to build some confidence, getting your fitness and workout on. So I know one thing, we were even talking about this before we were film recording, was fitness and working out, for especially for young people in the chronic illness and disability space, can feel intimidating to them, even more so than just in general people feeling intimidated by it. So for you, what would be your kind of initial advice to those that are wanting to bring more fitness into their lives, but they're worried how it'll go, or they feel intimidated by someone else's ignorance of them not knowing when they come in or how they might look with their illness or disability to master that?
For sure. And this was me a long time. By the time I started at the boxing gym in Nashville, I could count on one hand the amount of group fitness classes I had ever taken. Like anytime I walked into a public gym, it was very rare, for one, and I would like hide in the corner. So I understand that feeling completely. People, when they see me now, they probably wouldn't assume that, but that was me for most of my life. I would say it was my experience that the fears we create in our head are much bigger than reality. And so kind of the longer that you take to think about it, it tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I always say start before you feel ready. Like, even if you're like, I don't know, like what program or what exercises, whatever, just walk into a gym with some vague plan and try something. And like, if you don't have any experience, it might be great to do a class where someone is guiding you through it, so you don't feel so overwhelmed you're not coming up with it yourself. And again, I do understand the fear of like, are they going to know what to do with me? Because depending on where you live, depending on the trainer, it's give and take. And I have like thoughts for, those instances as well. But overall, generally speaking, I would say start before you feel ready, because you probably won't have a moment where you're like, yes, this is the day. And also have, in life in general, but specifically also in the gym, think of it as like putting reps in. So it was my experience that I didn't have nearly as negative experiences as I thought I would in the gym. But you do have a moment here and there that will be uncomfortable, or maybe someone handles it differently, or they stare and you just aren't in the mood to deal with it. And in those instances, I would say, no, it's not fair that you have to deal with that, but try to think of the average of your experiences. So it's kind of like the equivalent of someone saying, I want to date, and then they go on one bad date and they're like, I'm done dating. Dating is bad. It's like, well, that's not a realistic pool of dating. You tried it once. Now, if you go on 50 dates and 50 out of 50 dates are bad, yeah, I'd say like you could put it down for a second. Like, that's not great. But on average, if you go to the gym, 10, 20, 30 times, you might have one or two negative experiences, but at least for me, 28 of those experiences are going to be relatively positive. And so just keep coming back and keep the bigger picture in mind of why you're doing it. So it's not about that bad day or uncomfortable moment. It's about getting stronger and feeling more confident with time.
Yeah, I love how you said to not overthink it, because a big thing that you'll hear that you're trying to pre-prepare everything so you are the most prepared, and then by doing all of that preparation you can work into psyching yourself out. There's obviously like, you would want to go somewhere you're going to feel safe, and if that means going with somebody, a lot of times we'll always say having that like buddy system of bringing someone with you, even for, like you said, that first class you go to where there is a trainer there, or the first time you go in a gym, just have someone go with you. Just so you have someone there that knows you and how your body operates as well, so that even if both of you don't know what you're doing, you have that comfort, so that you can then rely on even on that bare minimum. And so many places, if you ask so many trainers that are there, even though majority of the time, because of me having chronic illnesses and that being in the rare disease space, none of them have either A, heard of my diagnoses, or B, dealt with them, but they've dealt enough with having to adapt for people on skill level, so that when they were able to then ask the right questions of like, okay, well, what happens when these things go south for you? Like, what are those things? And so then when I would do things, they would just come right over to me and go, I don't think we should do this one. Let's try this. And they would just know from their background, even though they didn't have experience with my health needs. So I think, like you said, being that proactive of just kind of walking in and being like, I'm going to need help with this or this is helpful, because like most people who are working there are going to want to be of assistance, even if they feel out of their depth. Let them be the ones to tell you, I'm out of my depth here.
Yeah.
And I even kind of going off of that too, when you're working with your clients that are in your amputee fitness program as well, do you feel that there's something that kind of from majority of them that is beneficial mentally for them, that you kind of do that coaching with them of when they're getting into fitness and doing that routine that you feel like you kind of say often to all of your different groups that you all kind of touch on a similar subject as you're getting into that fitness with them?
It sounds like a very general thing, but it's the most true. Just take it one day at a time. And sometimes it's just like take it one exercise at a time. And also, you know, I understand people coming into like my programs. I have people get frustrated because they're not doing every single workout or they get off a week. I'm like, hey, like that's life. You can't expect to join something and have 100% adherence all the time. That's just not realistic. But you know, 70%, it's kind of the same thing as I was saying about the big picture and the average. You know, if you have a bad week, you know, maybe you miss, if you're trying to do 4 workouts a week and you miss 3 of them, well, that's not a great average. But if you go to, you know, if you have 20 workouts for the month and you go to 14 of them, well, that's over 50%. And that's, you know, 15 workouts over like is better than doing no workouts. So it's just like kind of taking those things, like don't get overwhelmed by the thing in front of you that you feel frustrated with. Like just take it one day at a time, because as harsh as it sounds, the reality of the alternative is that you don't get better, and you joined for a reason. Like you're walking into the gym to make some kind of change, whether it's as simple as balancing on the prosthesis, feeling comfortable when you leave the house, you know, wearing a certain outfit, like whatever that looks like for you, there's a reason why you started, and it's not going to feel comfortable all the time because change is uncomfortable. But if you just be patient with yourself and take it one moment at a time, think big picture, it's much easier to handle, I think, mentally and physically.
Yeah. I like how you said that, because especially in like the chronic illness and disability space, we're so used to like looking at the numbers in the big picture and how well we did at something or how poorly, because we're so used to, like in my space, being in a doctor's appointment and you're looking at your numbers and how things look. So you're always kind of ingrained in, well, it's not good enough, or this is what it is. And so you can be even harder on yourself because you've had to learn to adapt very quickly. But like you said, if you look at it from a larger picture of, well, how you've actually been able to adapt much in a wider scale than just sort of the micro of it, it's more of a confidence boost than I think people might actually give themselves credit for. And even like just joining into your fitness program, you're going to approach things in a different way of how to adapt quickly, or give them that independence, where a lot of times, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times they might feel that that independence isn't something that people assume automatically when you're living with an illness or disability. So coming to you is like that first step of being like, I want to have more of being more in touch with my body and have that independence and learn how to really kind of harness it even more successfully than what people have just kind of assumed is, oh, well, you can do this and that's good enough, versus no, I want more.
Yeah. And I'm always telling amputees that, whether it's in my program or just online in general or in person, like no one is going to advocate for yourself more than you. And it's no one's responsibility to advocate for you more than you. Obviously they're incredible. I mean, like InvisiYouth, there are people that can help champion you, but they're still not going to care about you and your body specifically more than you. And I think rather than take that as like a slight, or like as I'm a victim of someone who doesn't care, it's better to take responsibility for, I am going to care and I'm going to do something about it. I just think that mindset shift is really important. And that's one of the reasons why I started doing what I was, because I was in a very outdated prosthetic setup because I hadn't been to the doctor. I'd moved to Nashville, and, you know, I just didn't really think about it, to be honest. And shockingly, you know, my doctor back in Pennsylvania that I hadn't seen in 3 years wasn't calling me to check in. And I spoke with an amputee that I met in person, and she was just like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, this is what I use. And she's like, that's such an outdated system. And she looked at me and she's like, it wasn't any doctor's fault. She was like, no one's going to advocate for you. Like, you need to figure this out. There's more out there, but you need to look into it and, you know, find what works for you. And it was kind of the kick in the butt that I needed. And I like started the process of finding a doctor here in Nashville. And, all of that was quite the process in itself, but it was like the most rewarding thing. So.
Yeah, no, I love how you said that too. It is sort of like that kind of giving yourself that mental accountability. And like you said, even going into coaching individually or group coaching too, that's part of what that's for, is to kind of find ways that other people can keep you accountable, but then learning what works for you and how to keep yourself accountable and still feel comfortable. Because I know, even kind of going off of that, I know you touched on the gym capacity. And I know for so many young people in the chronic illness and disability space, they might not have the physical space in their homes to do fitness in their homes or in apartment settings. And, depending on how great, the floors above and below are, there might not be a lot of jumping up and down that you can do, or making noises with weights and things. So people feeling like, oh, well, my friends go to these classes, but am I going to be the only one who has an illness or disability? And then do I feel confident enough to handle all of these situations? Like you said, you start to worry are going to happen. And in a lot of cases end up happening more often than not. So are there things that you would like encourage others if they feel like they have to go into a gym setting, or they want to, or join classes with friends, that you're like, these are the few things I do to myself as a pep talk? Or if you fall into a situation where you're in a class and you're like, oh, I don't like the reactions I'm getting, like, how do you reboost that confidence in those moments?
For sure. I think it's a line, because you can't control other people's reactions. And unfortunately, some people don't know how to react. And so there are times where, even if you shouldn't have to, I think it's easier to give grace, because there are moments where people don't mean to be unkind. They just don't know how to handle the situation because they haven't seen it before. And even though they kind of should know better, they just don't. And that's the reality. So I do have like kind of a mindset of like, give people more grace than you want to, because I'm used to it all the time. Most people don't encounter on a daily basis. At the same time, I think communication is really key. So if you're walking into a class, maybe like let the trainer know. And again, it's this line of not making it the focal point of your experience, because you don't, like, I hate to walk into a gym and announce like, everyone, I'm going to adapt today, and I want everyone to know. Like no one would want to be your friend. Like, that's annoying. Like, let's be real. But there's also, if you want to be taught and you want to get better, don't assume that they know how to do that. And so it's like you said, like talking to the trainer and saying, hey, this, I understand maybe you haven't had this before. And just being honest of like, maybe you're going in, you're like, this is my first time. I know that I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't really want you to approach me. Like, if you don't want them to approach that, like, you tell them that. Or be like, I want help. I want to be told how to get better. Please help me. So that's what I did. I mean, when I went to the boxing gym, the first 6 months, at that time I had a cosmetic cover over my leg. So they could tell that something was up, but no one knew that I was actually missing a leg. And I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to bring attention to it. And then I kind of got that like foundation of like, okay, I've gotten as good as I can on the very shallow level, but now I need some like tips of how to adapt and get a little better. But I need people to know what I'm working with. And that's when I went to the trainer. Arguably, I should have done a little sooner. But at that point, I was still early in my confidence journey, so I just wasn't comfortable with that yet. But eventually I did. I went to a trainer, was like, hey, I'm actually missing my leg, but I want to get better. So if you see something that I'm doing poorly, please tell me, or like give me a suggestion of how I can improve it. So I think that communication is really key, because imagine yourself on the other side of it. You see someone walk in and you don't want to offend them. You don't know what questions are going to offend them. So I think it's always better for the person dealing with the illness or disability to be the one to speak up and set the tone for how you want to be communicated with. So.
Yeah, I love how you said that, like setting the tone, because it is so true, like you said, of how much intervention you want is important or not, but also take kind of the elephant out of the room, that you're coming in with different needs than someone else. And where they will then, a lot of times other people in a fitness class or in a gym will, because they've, like you said, have never experienced it, they're coming with their own ignorance. They're like, oh, well, I've never experienced it, ergo I can't help.
Yeah.
Where they're not even thinking of, oh, well, it's just, I can tell them to try X, Y, or Z. And if none of those work, then I can try to get creative, or I can ask another trainer and like let them kind of be creative and take those steps and do that. But allow, like you said, setting that tone for yourself coming in, being like, I'm kind of nervous. I don't want a lot of attention, but like, I want to be safe here. Can you just kind of watch unless I'm doing something? Don't really come around. So that, like you said, does help. I think that for a lot of young people kind of going in, that kind of slow immersion into it feels better than, like you said, kind of walking in being like, hello, everybody, I'm going to need some help today. Which I think, like you said, is better. And even kind of going off of that, do you think there's, for people wanting to step into fitness that are in the disability or chronic illness space, are there like different types of fitness that you would say like, oh, these might be good kind of types of classes or things that you would suggest people to try, or are your new clients coming in that are like, gym class in high school was all I got for you.
Yeah.
And where do I start? Like, what's kind of your bench starting point?
Yeah, I think for that, it's understanding, it's finding something that you like, because especially if you're nervous for one, and two, like you don't really enjoy the gym, but you're doing it more out of like, this is necessary for my health. I think the best kind of workout is the one that you enjoy. And of course there's, studies on like, what the exact numbers for everything should be, like how many hours or how many minutes and whatever. But when you go into it with that mindset, like you're probably not going to stick with it, because you don't care at that point. I didn't care when I started the gym. So the boxing was the first thing that I ever stuck with, because I had so much fun. It is fun hitting things. But if you had told me 5 years ago that boxing was like a workout that I could do, I wouldn't even know. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. So I would say, one, get curious about what is out there. And then, like, if you're an amputee and then you want to run, you're going to need to get a running blade and like look maybe at a grant or sponsorship to be able to get that. All of the like extra legs that I have weren't covered by insurance. I applied for some kind of grant to help me pay for it, or to pay for it altogether. But if you're not ready for that, you're like, don't really want to dive in, just kind of see what feels fun. Most gyms offer like a free trial, that you can go in and try it out and see what you like, and start there. And then you can build. You don't have to be like naturally amazing at it. You just have to enjoy it, in my opinion. And there's always a way to figure out, if you walk into something, you like it, but you feel like you're not very good at it, I don't think that's a sign to stop. Because like you would see my first boxing class, bless it. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had so much fun. And I know, like, I don't, you take me out to a track, I have a running blade and I am bored in 30 seconds and I don't like it at all. Yep. So it's just like, people have that innate sense of what they enjoy. And just kind of finding that. And if you can find like someone to guide you if you're new, or like a program, that's why I created my amputee program, because I was like, I'm just going to create the program that I wish that I had growing up. Like, I walk into a gym and I don't know what to do. Like, this is what you do. This is how you start from the ground and you build up from there. So,
yeah. No, I love that. And even kind of the last thing I was going to ask, kind of going off of that, when you said this was why you built your amputee program, is there what would be a piece of advice you would give to Amy starting out in the world of CrossFit, that like it was going to be her first class, knowing now kind of in hindsight, what would be something of a piece of advice you would give to the younger you?
I would say, specifically like me starting CrossFit, learn to enjoy the process more than anything. So don't go into it with specific ideas of what you're going to look like, who you're going to be, what weight you're going to hit, whatever your goals would be. Just go into it being like, how can I enjoy just being here? And I think that is another reason why people kind of quit their workout programs early, because they start and they're like, well, maybe you start and you say, I want to lose 10 pounds. And then you're 2 weeks into it, you're hungry, you're cranky, and you haven't lost 10 pounds yet. And so you're just like, screw it. But it's once you find the moments, that's why I say find a workout you can enjoy. Like actually enjoy the process of doing it as much as you can. Even if you hate working out, like make it as easy as possible to do. Just get into the routine. Because even if you hate working out, you'll enjoy like the journey of realizing that you're sticking with something and like going towards a goal. But you have to enjoy the process because the goal is going to last like 5 seconds until you're like, okay, now I have to hit a new goal.
Yeah.
So if you're relying on that, it's, for me, putting so much pressure on myself on specific competition results, it's like that is the best way to set you up for being unhappy and failure. Just like enjoy the process of becoming a better athlete and the competition will take care of itself. So
yeah, that's great. That's even just approachable to everything, is enjoying the process over, especially with an illness or disability. It's always the journey. It takes more different routes or being creative to get to it, but finding the ways to enjoy it versus feeling like you're struggling through it and can find the pockets to enjoy it, make it more enjoyable of a process to get to all of those different goals you might have as the focus. So I love that. It's a good piece of advice, and it's a good way to end the episode as well. Amy, I can't believe it just literally flew by. I can't even imagine we're at the end. I had an absolute blast getting to chat with you, and I want so many people to be able to find you and the great work that you're doing. So where can they find you online and on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok at One Leg to Stand On. It's just all written out. And you can also find me at onelegtostandon.com or just my name, amybream.com. And all of that information, like my website as well, is on socials. So that's where you can find information about me and the programs that I offer.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to link all of that in the description and show notes so you can check Amy out. She makes great videos on her Instagram, and also checking out those fitness programs as well are really phenomenal. So for all of you guys thinking of getting into fitness, check it out, give a look at it. And also for InvisiYouth Charity, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at InvisiYouth. And you can find our InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, the podcast, on platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're able to, make sure we're at the end of the episode. Make sure if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. It definitely helps us out so much. If you can, give it a thumbs up, write a nice review on it, all those things. It definitely helps keep us getting new people like yourselves finding our podcast, and we can connect with more young people. So again, Amy, thank you so much for being our first guest of season 7 and celebrating our new milestone of hitting over 100 episodes. And I'm so glad that you've set the tone for season 7 to be a phenomenal set of episodes and guests. So I had an absolute blast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I've had so much fun.
Great. Thank you so much. And everybody who's watching and listening, I will speak with all of you soon. Bye, everybody.